Okay, settle down, everyone, take your seats, and welcome to today's explainer. Today, we are going to learn how the incredibly complex, magical, global internet actually works. But, we're going to skip the dry, boring tech manuals for a bit. Instead, we're going to look at the network through a lens literally all of us understand: how an elementary school operates. Seriously, think of the internet as just a giant building full of classrooms, long hallways, and playgrounds.
So you really have to wonder, how does that funny cat video or that massive update for your favorite video game travel across the entire world in the literal blink of an eye? Well, it travels in tiny digital envelopes called packets. Imagine millions of third graders sprinting around a massive school building, carrying these tiny notes and never, ever getting lost or bumping into each other. It sounds like absolute magic, but it's actually just a set of incredibly clever rules. Looking at the chalkboard for today's lesson plan, we're going to cover rules of the hallway, maps versus taking steps, sharing the school map, schools talking to schools, and finally, monitors and water buckets. Let's just jump right in. Okay, Section 1, Rules of the Hallway, or as network engineers like to call it, TCP congestion control. This is all about preventing giant hallway traffic jams. If everyone runs at once, people get squished, right? And those precious notes get dropped. Think back to the older rule we used to use, TCP Reno. That was like a student safely testing the hallway by adding just one extra running step per turn. Super safe for sure, but on a really long hallway, it took forever. But today, we use the modern rule, TCP cubic. TCP cubic actually uses a math curve based on a clock on the wall, literal real time. It lets students sprint super fast when the hall is empty, slow down safely when they sense a crowd forming, and then carefully speed back up again to find gaps. So TCP Cubic's entire job is purely to keep those hallways clear on long, fast networks without unfairly penalizing the kids who have to walk a much further distance. But wait, what about the classroom itself? Well, we use a totally different rule for that called the receive window. Just picture a teacher standing at the door, making sure only a few kids enter the room at a single time, protecting the doorway from getting crammed. Two completely different problems solved with two different rules. Moving right along to Section 2, Maps versus taking steps, which brings us to routing versus forwarding. People actually mix these two up all the time, but they are totally different concepts. Routing is the big software brain sitting up in the principal's office. We call it the control plane. It's planning the whole map and figuring out the best overarching paths. Forwarding, on the other hand, well, that's the data plane. It's the super fast hardware legs of the router. Forwarding doesn't sit there thinking about the whole map. It literally just looks at a sign at a single intersection and turns left or right instantly. Which naturally brings us to Section 3, Sharing the School Map. Let's look at intradomain routing algorithms. How do the students in routers actually figure out the map inside their own school? You've basically got two main ways to share that map. First, you have link state protocols, like OSPF. In this method, the principal gives every single student a complete, perfect blueprint of the school, and they use a fancy math trick called Dijkstra's algorithm to calculate the absolute shortest path. The second way is distance vector. Now here, kids don't have a map at all. They use an equation called Bellman-Ford, which honestly is really just a giant game of telephone. They're just asking the kid next to them, hey, how many steps to the gym? But you gotta watch out for distance vector, because it has this hilarious flaw. Well, maybe not hilarious if you're the router, called the count to infinity problem. Because kids are only asking their immediate neighbors, good news travels fast, but bad news travels agonizingly slowly. If the hallway to the gym collapses, Billy might think Susie knows a detour and Susie thinks Billy knows a detour. So they end up walking in circles, running in these infinite routing loops, just counting their steps up to infinity until they finally realize, oh wait, the gym is totally closed. All right, time for recess. Section 4, Schools Talking to Schools. This is where we look at interdomain routing, or BGP. How does this all work when entirely different school districts, known as autonomous systems, need to talk? Well, when a school router ranks which path to use to send a message outside, it follows a strict playground hierarchy of trading cards. And spoiler alert, it always follows the money. First choice, paying customers, obviously, because they get paid to carry those notes. If they can't do that, they choose peers, which are free, equal treats. And their absolute last, worst-case choice is sending the note through a provider because they actually have to fork over their own lunch money to use that path. So how do we actually control that flow? Schools use a really strict rule called local pref, or local preference, to pick their absolute favorite exit door to leave their own school. But if they want to kindly ask a neighboring school to use a specific entrance when coming in, they use an attribute called MED. So just remember, local pref controls your outgoing traffic, and MED gives little hints to your neighbors about your incoming traffic.
Though sometimes a school just wants to get rid of a message instantly. Literally, they call this hot potato routing. If a network has multiple exit doors to get to the very same destination, it won't necessarily look for the closest geographic door. Instead, it just drops the message at the closest routing exit to get it out of its own hands as fast as humanly possible. Just tossing the hot potato over the fence. Today, instead of paying big, expensive providers to pass those notes, schools just meet up in person at giant playgrounds called Internet Exchange Points, or IXPs. Here, they can trade notes directly, and to make it way easier, they use a route server. It's kind of like a teacher's aide who collects all the routes and redistributes them, so the kids don't have to talk to literally everyone individually. This completely flattens the internet, makes things way cheaper, and helps filter out massive playground bullies, which we know as DDoS attacks.
Okay, last up, Section 5, Monitors and Water Buckets, covering traffic policing and queues. What actually happens when these kids rush into the hallways way too fast? We need traffic policing. Imagine you're in line for the water fountain. If the kid at the very front of the line gets totally stuck, literally nobody else behind them can get a drink, even if other fountains are sitting right there, wide open. We call this head-of-line blocking. To fix it, our clever routers play a matching game. Engineers call it parallel iterative matching, where they basically switch up the lines every round so multiple groups of kids can go to different fountains all at the same time.
And to police the overall traffic, routers act like super strict hall monitors using two distinct bucket methods. The token bucket allows for short, capped bursts of running. If you have enough hall pass tokens saved up, a whole group of kids can sprint through all at once. But the leaky bucket, it is way stricter. It enforces a constant, steady walking speed, just dripping kids through at a completely even rate. Actually, scratch that. It's not just strict. If you try to shove too many kids into the leaky bucket at once, the overflow rule breakers get sent straight to detention, meaning they are dropped from the network entirely. As we pack up our backpacks for the day, isn't it absolutely wild to think about? Every single time you load up a video or send a text, millions of tiny packets are surviving hot potatoes, leaky buckets, and playground bullies just to reach your screen perfectly intact. It's honestly a modern miracle of human cooperation. So I'll leave you with this. If you were the principal of the entire internet, what new playground rules would you invent to keep the whole world connected? Think about it. Class dismissed, and I'll see you in the next explainer.